Late Harry Kalasha was one of a new group of aspiring gangsters who are shooting, bombing, and buying their way into power in Detroit's underworld.
A deadly new strain of organized crime is flexing its muscle on the streets of Detroit, and some people are calling it the new mob.
They are young, heavily armed Chaldeans who fancy themselves the new mob.
One of the most exotic crime stories out of Detroit from back in the 80s and early 90s involves a group of people called Chaldeans. These are Catholic Iraqis that came to mostly Detroit, a little bit in Chicago and some in San Diego, but mostly Detroit, starting kind of when Saddam came into power in the late 60s and right in the aftermath of the Detroit riot or uprising, whatever you want to use, and a lot of Jewish and other store owners were leaving the city to Chaldeans because they had been Christians in a Muslim country where technically consuming and definitely selling alcohol was prohibited. They had a history of being purveyors of alcohol in Iraq, so they eased in to owning a lot of the liquor stores in Detroit. To this day, they almost own almost all of them. And before the rise of Walmart and Target, when you had neighborhood groceries, they owned a lot of the neighborhood grocery stores, or almost all of them. And before the rise of check cashing places being all over the place, their markets and stores were where people cashed their checks. So, which is all legal, fine business, and they made a lot of money. But there was a couple families that were involved in some pretty far out criminal stuff that was all over the news in the late 80s and early 90s. And I lived at 6 Mile and Woodward, and this was all going on up at 7 Mile and Woodward. And one of the big incidents in the case, a murder that happened in 93 of innocent bystander of a paid hit, happened a block from me at one of my neighborhood liquor stores.
They're together. Okay, that's a 14. They are together.
Three men meet in a Dearborn shopping center parking lot. The man on the left is Jaime Geraldo, a Colombian drug supplier and money launderer. He and his brother Norberto were based in Detroit, working for the Colombian cocaine cartel. The man in the middle is Bassem Jargis. The taller one on the right is Basil Mezzi. Both are Chaldeans who were indicted and pled guilty in the biggest drug money laundering investigation in Detroit and U.S. history.
It appears there's going to be a transfer of packages.
Jargis and Mezzi would give Colombian drug traffickers suitcases brimming with cash. The money was laundered through domestic and foreign banks and ultimately into the coffers of the Colombian drug cartel. During a year-long investigation, undercover customs agents accounted for $8 million in drug profits collected for the cartel in Detroit.
We observed them to meet only with suspect Chaldean drug traffickers and no one else. That $8 million could have come from only one source, and that was the Chaldeans that the Geraldo brothers were meeting with.
Bassem Jargis and Basil Mezzi were part of a drug organization headed by the late Harry Kalasha, a Chaldean murdered execution style last winter.
So if you remember the movie The Infiltrator, starring Bryan Cranston, which was about the IRS infiltrating Colombian drug dealers in the 80s as money launderers, they had this organization they were selling drugs in cities all across the country, and this IRS undercover agent tied in with the Bank of Commerce International, BCCI, which was its own big scandal that involved the Iran-Contra, and there was terrorist money in it, but it's a whole other story. They were taking down that bank, and they were money laundering for these Colombians. Well, these Colombians, when they made a deal with the IRS, they said, okay, we got these cities, and they guaranteed to turn in $50 million a month. It was going to be like $8 million in Houston, $12 million in LA, $10 million in New York, and $20 million a month in Detroit.
Several federal and local agencies busted this tractor trailer coming into the Detroit area with 100 kilos of cocaine. Kalasho is said to have masterminded the deal with his close ties to Colombian suppliers. The coke was not only to have ended up in the city of Detroit, but several suburbs as well.
So as you can see, a substantial portion of the $20 million a month that was coming out of Detroit was coming from the Chaldeans. So they got them, $8 million in 60 days or something. So 4 million a month, just as one set of Chaldeans was turning in just to these two guys. And as part of this investigation, at one point, a trailer truck came into Detroit, and feds were sitting watching it be unloaded of 100 kilos. And because different, a DEA field office in Detroit, and there's DEA field office in Tampa, where I think the load came from, and then you got FBI, and different federal agencies want to make different cases, take the credit for different things. So for whatever series of reasons, this 100-kilo load, they said, let it go. So if drugs are destructive and the police are supposed to be getting drugs off the streets, think about what they just did. They let 100 kilos come into the city. Now, that was just like a 1-week supply for a couple of the Chaldeans at the time. That was obviously not enough to supply the city of Detroit, but 100 kilos were let in to be sold, and then they said, we'll put a track around the next truck, and that truck was taken into custody, and a couple people, or at least one person, he fell under the same law as White Boy Rick. The 650 law got life, no parole. Several other people got long terms. Several of the Chaldeans, in that case, I think, fled, let's just say, to a foreign country and never came back. And they're on Facebook. They talked to Scott Bernstein on Facebook. I mean, the feds obviously know all this, but so this was a long time ago. But so it was a big thing.
Why my family came to the United States? Yeah. Oh, we fled United States.
The political background of this, so that was some political stuff with the banking, but this particular Chaldean family, the Quarry Kalasho family, Lou Quarry, who's still alive and remember there used to be L.A. Coney Islands? I was told that stood for Lou Quarry. I think that's true, but Lou Quarry, he recently, some years back, he had to do a hunger strike in the state of Michigan after completing his prison term. That they tried to pick him up and deport him, but they have a hard time deporting the Chaldeans because you can't really send people back to a war zone, which Iraq was up until recently. So the Kalasho Quarry family, there's a bunch of backstory, but I'm going to keep it brief here. In 1968, Lou Quarry, who's still alive, he tried to assassinate. They were associated with the leftists, with the Communist Party in Iraq. He tried to kill Saddam right when he took power, and obviously he failed.
If you're thinking about selling a home anywhere in Southeast Michigan or any of the locations highlighted on this map, stop. Don't do it the traditional.
So members of the family were tortured. They had to escape, and they ended up in Detroit. Now, Tommy Kalasho at one point told us, basically, they allied themselves with, some of them became bikers and Italian mafia, like that they allied themselves with the rough people of Detroit as a form of protection because Saddam's Ba'ath Party, the Ba'ath Party was a pan-Arab political party primarily existing in Iraq and Syria. Saddam was the head of the Ba'ath Party in Iraq. Long ago, back leading up to World War II, the Nazis were giving some funding to the Ba'ath Party. Well, did it exist then? A pan-Arabist thing that led to the Ba'ath Party, but that's yet another interesting, complex story. But here we have Tommy Kalasho giving us some of the background.
Oh, yes. My uncle did make attempt against Saddam because he was two different parties. And because of that, he was marked for death. We fled the United States because Saddam was trying to kill my uncles, and he tortured my father. So we all, my mother and us, the kids, we fled on our own. Aside from my father fled his way, and we met eventually in Lebanon. The reason for that is because they tortured him for him to give up my uncle, but he did not know where they were. They had fled already because they were anti-Saddam, and my uncle was like very anti-Saddam with the Communist Party, things like that.
Kalasho was shot 4 times in front of this home at 15 West Greendale in Detroit. Later, a man named Riyad Jihad turned himself into Detroit police. Today, he was charged with the crime. Tonight, News 4 has learned that Harry Kalasho is being investigated by Detroit suburban and federal drug agents as being one of this area's biggest cocaine importers, a leader in a growing group of Detroit Chaldeans allegedly in the Detroit area drug trade.
We are looking into some information, some intelligence that he is, in fact, a wholesale trafficker of cocaine. He came to our attention as a possible cocaine trafficker last year.
At 24 or 26 years old, there are varying accounts. Harry Kalasho is reputed to have ordered at least 2 executions. The targets, members of the Chaldean community who crossed him. In one case, sources tell News 4 he offered a bonus if a victim's head was cut off.
3 men admitted to the police they were hired by Chaldean drug baron Harry Kalasho to kill Gago. They also admitted killing another Chaldean, Munther Salim, on orders from Kalasho. Earlier this year, Kalasho was gunned down on Detroit's north side.
So Harry Kalasho was a young guy, about 25. He was kind of the golden boy. He was murdered in his own driveway in I think the winter of '89. Again, that was about 8 or 9 blocks from my house. Big hit, famous case. They got him in his driveway, even though his own bodyguards were there. And then when he was dead, the feds started saying, oh, he had been the kingpin. He paid for all these hits. He was putting a $10,000 bounty on people to take off people's heads. Nobody's head was actually taken off, so who knows what's really true.
At a gas station on 7 Mile Road, there is a small crater in the floor where a stick of dynamite went off under a car on a hoist. A few blocks away, a house is boarded up after another bombing. Investigators believe these events are connected.
It's a matter of record here in the community that there has been acts of violence, murders, counter-murders, explosions, dynamite, the dynamiting of a gas station.
Now, what is true is that there were a series of bombings and a lot of explosives that were going to be used that were found. And in fact, for you Detroiters, you know that gas station on the corner of 7 Mile and Woodward? Back in, I don't know, 88 or something, that blew up. Like, not kind of fire, like it boom, like it blew up. It was blown up like a mafia movie. So, and I remember you would walk around over there by 7 Mile and between John R. and Woodward, the new mob would be spray painted on the wall, and it was real. And there used to be a liquor store, something, Seven Brothers or something. And it was right there on 7 Mile, just east of Woodward. And the Chaldeans had so much cocaine. That was a place you could go. It was like New York. You could go over there and buy weight outside. You could just pull up. I mean, I don't think you get a key. I don't know. I wasn't buying that type of stuff. But like, you could just go over there and get, oh, we want a half ounce. They'd serve you on the street. Young Chaldeans, it was, you know, that's who was doing it. It was a wild area. That area is all burned out now. All the Chaldeans have moved to the suburbs, except for a few holdouts that probably aren't doing so well in life. Even the Chaldean church is closed over there.
Harry was a very kind man. As much as people talk about him, reference to the government, a lot of people talk good about him because he helped a lot of people.
The intelligence.
Hey, check this out. So I stopped buying random lotto tickets and started doing this instead. You've probably